just have to stand right here. First, let me just welcome everyone and say thank you for coming to the meeting tonight and for making it a priority. We are videotaping the meeting so that we can put it up on the web for folks who can't make it to the meeting tonight. Then they'll be able to see the meeting in its entirety. And then we also have somebody who is translating through sign language the meeting so that folks who are hearing impaired can also get the information and understand the meeting. And so my name is Liz Archuleta. I am your representative on the Coconino County Board of Supervisors. I represent District 2, and that's where you live, is in District 2. Tonight's meeting is particular to residents who live on Kevin's Way or on the roads off of Kevin's Way. But there may be some folks here that live on Brandis or off of Brandis. And if you're here from Brandis, can you just raise your hand just so that we can try to, okay, great. Because some of the information we're going to give today is going to be specific to Kevin's Way, but we will definitely fold in some information for Brandis so that you can have that information as well. And last night at the Brandis meeting, we had some folks from Kevin's Way or off of Kevin's Way, so we tried to include some information as well. So let me just say that I am just so proud of this community and how everyone has come together to help one another. I know this weekend was a big weekend. I saw a lot of folks that were clearing out debris and neighbors helping neighbors, and that's one of the things that I've always known about the Timberline community. For the last 22 years, I've always known that community helps community in this neighborhood, and I really, really appreciate that. The county can help out and can do a lot, but we can only do so much, and neighbors helping neighbors is just something that is a value that I hope the community never loses, and so I want to thank you for that. Tonight in the room we have a lot of folks from the county and some folks from the state, as well as our meteorologist, not the county's meteorologist, but our community's meteorologist, who is here. We'll be having a variety of folks give an update. Why don't we try this? Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, sorry about that. We'll close the window, make sure the wind doesn't come through. We have a variety of folks who will be giving an update, and after the update and the presentations, we will definitely leave time for questions, and then we would ask that everybody go into the bays here for specific questions. So we'll have maps, we'll have the folks that are working on roads, the folks that are working on flood mitigation, we'll have everybody over there, so if you want to ask specific questions, specific to your property, and more detailed questions, we'll have that in this room over here. So let me just say that our county manager, Jimmy Jane, is here, right there. And we also have our emergency manager, Todd Whitney, is here. There you are, Todd. And we also have, as I mentioned, our county public works staff. We have representatives from United Way that are here who have been helping us do damage assessments. And then we have some contractors that are here that have been working on the roads to try to extend our county crews and our force. So I know this is a very emotional subject that we're going to talk about, the flooding. I understand. I want to tell you that I empathize because I was here in 2010. I was here when the fire started. I was here when the first flood started. I was here with the 36 floods that we had in 2010. I've been here for every year after that and since. And I can tell you that, like you, me, and the entire county, we thought we were done as well. And so just when you think you can breathe a sigh of relief, it's like bang, another flood. And I know that it brings back, a lot of memories and the whole trauma around 2010 when we had that really, really horrific flood. And so I understand that emotions and tensions are high. And your safety is our number one priority. That's the number one priority is the safety of people. Of course, we're concerned about property damage, but the fact that no one was hurt in this flood is something that we're very relieved about, and something that we continue to be concerned about when we have disasters like this, events like this. So I don't want to steal Brian Klimowski's thunder, the meteorologist, for Flagstaff, but I will say this, and you will hear this from him. He's in his own scientific way. You will hear that this was an unprecedented 1,000-year rain event, and that was preceded by two other huge events. As you know, earlier in the week we had a lot of rain. So you're going to hear from the Weather Service that this was extraordinary. I can tell you that I was out here on the ground around 1:30 and was on Brandis and saw the trees and the boulders, the 1 foot, 2 foot boulders coming down Brandis and through the channels. And it was something that, again, I thought we were past, but also understand that with a 1,000-year rain event, that is not in my control or your control or anybody's control, and certainly caused the scar burn area to have that debris roll down the hill. So tonight we're going to hear about mitigation efforts both in the neighborhoods and on the forest. We're going to talk about recovery options and what specifically happened to your property. If you haven't called in to our call-in center to report what happened to your property, I would ask you to report that out to us tonight. We're trying to capture all of the damage so that we can quantify that, and we declared a state of emergency. We're going to want to turn in those numbers to the state as well as to the federal government to see if we can get some assistance in the efforts that we've been doing to either get some funding assistance or apply in the future for some grants to be able to provide some assistance. So we want to know specifically what happened to your property. That's why we have all these maps that'll be out here in the bay, and would ask you to report that out. I'd like for you to please hold your questions to the end. I'd like to be able to go through all the presentations and get the information, and then we'll take questions at the end. So what happened since 2010 is when we had the fire and the floods. After that summer, the county and myself, we worked night and day to secure funding and to mitigate the down channel flooding. And the steep slopes that are up there, and when that much water comes down, there is no mitigation system. There is no channel system that can be built to provide 100% mitigation to that type of water and those types of flows. And so, you might ask, well, what happened? Did the channels work? Did the mitigation system work? Absolutely, it worked. It worked. A 1,000-year event, if you were to build a channel system like a 1,000-year event, those channels, if you're familiar with the channels in Los Angeles, those wouldn't even handle probably a 1,000-year event. So the damage would have been catastrophic if the on-forest mitigation measures had not been constructed and the channels in the neighborhood. And so you'll hear tonight from our engineer for the county, the engineering division manager, Christopher Tressler, and he worked actually on the mitigation measures. He engineered the project. Now he works for the county, but it's great to be able to have the history of him having been here in 2010. He'll present in detail about how the measures performed. And then we're also going to talk about plans going forward and how the county is here to assist you. how we can help with debris removal, and how we can help you stay informed during floods. As you know, we're just at the beginning of the monsoon season, so we want to make sure that everybody is signed up for the emergency alerts. We want to make sure that everybody, we have your email addresses or the way you prefer to be communicated with, so that we can get information out to you in a timely fashion. I think that's about it. Flood insurance. I do want to say this. I want to remind everyone, in 2010, everybody went out and they got flood insurance. I don't know if you've kept your flood insurance or not. I would just really ask you to consider, if you dropped your flood insurance, I would ask you to consider obtaining flood insurance again. And maybe you haven't let it go, but just a reminder about making sure that you consider keeping your flood insurance, continue to keep it, or going back and getting flood insurance. So I look forward to speaking with you. We will stay here as long as we need to stay here. We will be in the Bay as long as we need to be in the Bay, answering specific questions, answering questions you have about the presentations, until you get all of your questions out, okay? So I want to just ask you, because I know emotions are high, just to please be respectful of the presenters. If you disagree with them, that's fine. We want to hear the disagreement, but we want it to be in a way that's respectful of them and of one another. And so, again, we'll stay as long as we need to stay here, okay? And so the first person that I'm going to hand it over to is Brian Klimowski, and he is with the Weather Service. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Liz. And thank you all for being here this evening. I know this is a difficult time when extreme weather hits. My job this evening is simply to take 5 or 10 minutes and provide some perspective or provide some context to this event to help you understand maybe why what happened on that day. So I'm going to present some figures, some numbers, some accumulations. You've probably heard a lot of the terminology that has been used for this event. And I'm here to kind of help put that into a package that is more easily understandable. If you have any questions about any of the data, afterwards, please let me know. I can provide hard copies or links to where a lot of this data resides online.
Brian, can you do me a favor? Can we ask how many people were here in 2010, just to know how many people have the history and the background?
That's a great idea. How many folks were here in 2010? Almost everybody.
Okay.
Almost everybody.
Yeah.
All right. I also live not too far from here. My neighborhood was impacted as well in 2010. I live a little farther down in Doney Park, just up from the Sunset Crater Estates. So let's just get right down to the nuts and bolts. Over 11 inches of rain fell during the week of the flood. Okay, that includes the flood itself event on the 18th and the week prior. I'll show you some figures that demonstrates that this is just below the average entire monsoonal rainfall for this area. And we got it all in a week. Really can't talk about July 11th, the day of the large flood, without putting it in context that we had 2 large events preceding it, one on the 14th and one on the 16th. And as many of us know, when you get heavy rainfall in one area, it tends to amplify the impacts of storms that come immediately after that. The earth is saturated, water runs off easier, it makes it easier to flood. We had 2 events preceding the large event that we had on the 18th. Analyzing the data, we saw that the hourly rainfall rate that we observed was over twice that of the big flood in 2010. In 2010, we had 1.5 to 1.8 inches reported in just under an hour. In this event, 3.8, okay, at one of the gauges, almost double that. And almost 3 times the total rainfall fell on the northern part of the burn scar on July 18th, 3 times the rainfall than what happened on July 20th, 2010. It really was a huge event, something that I haven't seen before in my 15 years here. So what you're going to see now is a couple images. I'm going to walk you through how the event unfolded over your area. Essentially, we had easterly flow. That means the storms were moving from east to west, but redeveloping over and over again, just east of Highway 89, and then advecting over the area. I'm going to show you reflectivity images, basically showing you where the heavy rain is falling in red, torrential rain in purple, and lighter rain in the yellows. For a little bit of geographical reference, Highway 89 right here, Copeland Ave is right there, and a faint outline of the Schultz burn scar right there. This is at 11:15 a.m., just when the precipitation had become established over the higher peaks at this time. By 11:30, we saw it build over the neighborhoods just west of Highway 89. 11:45, the storms were still there. Heavy rain over the northern part of the burn scar. 12 o'clock, things were intensifying quickly up higher in the drainages. This includes the Brandis, the Thames, Upper Copeland area at this time. At 12:15, things were just really horrific high in the peaks. Just torrential rainfall and hail was falling at this time, high in the drainage. Going at 12:30, heavy rain over the entire drainage here on the north side. Now this is over an hour since it started, okay, and it is still raining heavy. 12:45, 1 o'clock, 1:15, you see the picture. Finally starts to fade slowly by 1:30, 1:45. It was an unusual event to have that repeat building over the same area for almost 2 hours continuously. What you're seeing here is a comparison. We added up all the rainfall at 3 of the gauges each year since they were put in, 2011, 2012, 2013, for the Lennox-Wapatki gauge, Thames Peaceful Way, and Upper Copeland, and compared each one for the 6 years or 7 years that we've had these gauges in. 2011, 2013, 2016 are basically the biggest years in each one of those drainages, with 15 to about 22 inches in each one of them. What this little hashed bar is the week-long total, including the event on the 18th, showing that we had in a week almost the season equivalent of the average of many of these stations. Actually, here on Thames Peaceful Way, much more, almost double what we had the entire monsoon last year over that specific location, all in a week. There was a lot of water around. 2018. Okay, let's march through time, starting on the 14th, and I'm going to show you the 14th, 16th, and then the 18th precipitation events in a geographical way here. So what you see in the numbers on are actually values from the precipitation gauges. The colored image in the background is a Doppler radar estimate of the rainfall, just to give you an idea where the heaviest rain is and just the gradients and where the heaviest rain fell. This is on the 14th, had over 2 inches of rain in the far northern drainages, the ones that primarily impacted Wapatki trails and the Brandis drainages. This is over 2 inches of rain. It was the first event of the season, so a lot of that water soaked in. Didn't have that much of an impact on the neighborhoods, to my knowledge. But 2 inches in a couple hours, that's a big event. That's on the order of magnitude of what 2010 event was. Let's look at what happened on the 16th. Here we had a very broad event over the upper and middle parts of the drainages, a broad swath of over 2 inches, and at this time, the highest rainfall rate in 1 hour we had seen at any location, almost 3.8 inches in 1 hour. it's really interesting to compare this event with what happened in 2010, July 20th, the big flood, because it's very similar. I'm going to show you the next slide, which shows you the rainfall distribution from 2010. Now the colors don't match, and I apologize with that. We had a different system at that time. But really just look at where the 2-inch contour is between July 16th this year and 2010, the day of the big flood. We had 1.7, 1.7, 1.44, with probably a maximum of 2 inches high in the drainages. Compared to the 16th, we had almost 4 inches, 222, a larger swath of 2 inches. This really was a bigger event than July 20th, 2010. Of course, it fell on very different earth. Okay, it fell on a mountain that's had 8 years of recovery, 7.5 years of recovery. It fell on a mountain which has been mitigated. And the impacts on July 16th were minimal. Were minimal in the neighborhood. Let's go to the 18th. This is the big event. This is what happened on Wednesday the 18th, where we had a very large swath of 2 inches, a very large swath of over 4 inches that fell over the northern part of the drainages, and almost 6 inches measured at one of the gauges. This far surpasses the previous largest events we had had. And it also fell on already saturated ground. I dug out as many of the observations from the network of gauges we have up there, and the rainfall rates were truly remarkable. We had another hourly measurement of 3.8 inches again, but much of this 4.5 to over 5 inches fell within 2 hours. I looked up what the maximum daily rainfall records are for all of Arizona, and there's only a handful of them above 5 inches. Okay, let's compare rainfall rates really quick. During the event on the 18th, rainfall rates 3.82 were measured at the Thames Peaceful Way gauge. These are the maximum rainfall rates in every previous year. It more than doubled the greatest rainfall rates we saw. Here's the same chart for the Upper Campbell gauge, showing 2018, again almost 3.8. The largest previous was in 2015, just under 2. So again, almost double the hourly rainfall rates in 2018. It truly stands alone in comparison to the previous 7 years we had seen on the Schultz. So this was indeed an extremely rare and torrential rainfall event. Measured storm total up to 5.9 inches. There were likely greater than 6 inches in some of the locations. Up to 3.8 in 1 hour, which if you calculate the max hourly rainfall rate and use what's called NOAA Climate or NOAA Atlas 14, it calculates a return interval at that location of about 500 years of this rainfall rate of 3.8 inches. But we have 3 gauges measure over 4.5 inches in 2 hours. If you do that same calculation, you get an estimated statistical return interval of 1,000 years. Now understand, these are estimates. It's applying statistics on a very small data set to try to gather and try to put into perspective very large events and a very wide spectrum of events. To kind of parse the definition of this return interval a different way, that's perhaps easier to understand. If we have what's called a 100-year event, there's a 1% chance that that will happen at that location any given year. Now, on a typical active monsoon day, we'll see several 100-year events over northern Arizona, over the area that we forecast for. That's not unusual. That's very typical. But again, the odds of it happening at one location are much smaller, are very remote. So I'm going to go ahead and end my presentation there. So, thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And then, are we going to have the lights down for this next one too? Okay, so the next person is going to present is Chris, and he's the head of the county's engineering division. And I think, Brian, just another way that I've heard rainfall explained as well is like for every inch it equals like 1 foot of snow. And so basically if we were looking at that event, it would have been 6 feet of snow in less than 2 hours.
Yep.
Okay, Chris?
As Supervisor Archuleta said, I'm the Engineering Division Manager, and I'm going to show some slides about what we saw with the flood events and how they impacted the area. Then I'm going to show you some of the assessment we did on the Forest Service to see what happened up there. So just to orient ourselves with how we see the watersheds and where we live. This is, this is Kevin's Way down here, and this is what we call the Copeland Basin, and up here is Brandis, the Brandis Channel, and so this watershed above Kevin's Way is called the Peaceful Way watershed, and the watershed above what feeds into Brandis is called the Thames watershed. Lower down here is the Copeland watershed. This is Copeland Lane right here. Highway 89 runs right here north and south. So we're going to talk about what happened in the Peaceful Way watershed, what happened in the Thames watershed. You might remember that the county sponsored some flood mitigation measures in the watershed of Thames and through the residential area. There were no flood mitigation measures implemented in the watershed in Peaceful Way. There was some certain criteria. The residents needed to provide easements and things like that, and it just didn't come together for the residents. We can talk more about that, and we have some information. Maybe we do that in the bay. But so looking at the drainages and the flow impact, and I won't belabor the point, you've all experienced several extraordinary events. If you went to other places in the state or other places in the country, it just doesn't happen, the kind of weather that we've been getting. But in the Wapaki Trails watershed that's just north of us, north of Brandis, they received a greater than 100-year event, and that was a mitigated watershed, and things flowed fairly well. Brian talked about the 1,000-year event, the rainfall event that we saw in Brandis and Peaceful Way, and then the southern drainages, south of Copeland, what we call Campbell or the paintbrush areas, they received a 50-year event. Before we did the mitigation work, we were getting rainfall events somewhere around 50 and 25-year events, and it was causing a lot of problems throughout the area. And since we did that mitigation, this is the real test of all that infrastructure, and we don't see damage and debris in the Copeland area and these southern drainages that we see that experienced where we had this 1,000-year event. So further south, the same type of practices, the same type of flood mitigation measures that were implemented in Brandis and Wapaki Trails, they really held up closer to our design event. We designed it to be about a 25-year return interval, or the capacity of the channels and the infrastructure could stand a 25-year event. That's pretty standard. Initially, the design wasn't there. The capacity, we needed some forest recovery, and I think that's part of what we've seen and why there was less impact. The forest recovery paired with the mitigation measures. So we'll get into some pictures here. This is on Brandis Way. So we'll walk down Brandis Way. On the other set of slides here, we'll work our way down through Peaceful Way. So this is about halfway up Brandis. We're looking upstream. This is Brandis Way right here, and this is a channel, and that should be a bridge. And the excessive debris ended up blocking those bridges. that parallel, or that are in the channel that parallels Brandis. So water flowed out onto the Brandis Road, and a fair amount of it re-entered the channel, and some of it spread out through the residential area. Here's looking upstream from Highway 89. You can see the peaks there, and you can see the debris. And so I was out there just maybe right after the storm peaked, and the flows were going down just a little bit, but the debris. But this channel wasn't there before. We're transporting a significant amount of water that would have previously ended up, closer to Kevin's Way and El Dorado and those areas, that we were able to transfer out of the neighborhood. And then here's at the intersection of 89 and Brandis Way, and we did spill out onto the highway again a little bit. If you remember, when this happened in 2010, we crossed the road with the water, and it went into Timberline, and those neighborhoods were flooded. This is even a bigger flow event than that, and we contained it to this side of the water. The water was contained to this side of the highway. Well, this is at Kevin's Way, and this the bridge, and this is the Highway 89 right here. The Copeland Basin is right out here. So water's coming from Brandis here, but then it's also coming down Kevin's Way, and some of the water is spilling into the channel. Ideally, more of the water would have spilled into the channel here at Kevin's Way. Some of it's going on the other side, and it's armored, and there's riprap for that to happen. That's ideal. And then this flow goes into the Copeland Basin. A Copeland Basin is designed, it feeds, or it gets water fed to it from Copeland and from potentially from Kevin's Way, the Peaceful Way neighborhoods. So much debris was in there, the woody debris, that it partially blocked the outfall gates, the outfall structure. So there's an emergency spillway here. And that was activated. The water rose in there several feet, and in a controlled way, it left the emergency spillway back into the channel. It was engineered to do this. That emergency spillway, it was constructed in there for this purpose. If we wouldn't have had this basin in here, water would have rushed downstream in a less controlled or metered way. And here we're standing at Copeland Lane, and this is the ditch or the culvert that goes underneath the highway and goes out to Cinder Lakes. And you can see that it looks like a lot less flow, but it's just being metered out by the basin, and we're passing the flow in a lot more controlled manner, and we're not spilling out and flooding that Fernwood area or the other neighborhoods. And then this is the flow going out towards the Cinder Lakes. This is what Wapaki Trails look like during the height of it. It's in its channel. It's controlled. The homes that were previously flooded didn't get flooded out. That Wapaki Trails channel flows into on the other side of the Highway 89, what we call the Girls Ranch berms. And this is mitigation work that has maybe been around before 2010. There was some resemblance of these berms. Somebody's shaking their head back there like they remember it. This has happened before. These berms were there. They were in a pretty degraded condition before. And so the county fortified them, and were able to pass this water without flooding out the Fernwood area. And then this is the Campbell Ditch. This was with a 50-year event, 50-year rainfall event. And we had a foot or a foot and a half of water in there. And so in these southern drainages, we didn't see a lot of the flooding that we saw previously. So I know you don't live on Brandis, but I think that gives you a snapshot of how the significant amount of the water was flowed through in the mitigated areas. So some of the on-forest and more Kevin's Way or Peaceful Way watershed type water, and what we saw we'll go through now. So this is what an alluvial fan, a restored alluvial fan, looked like above Brandis. It's up in the forest there. Ideally, an alluvial fan spreads water out and disperses the energy, and so the sediment and the rocks, the debris, fall out in the forest, and then it won't go into the infrastructure in the residential area, and it doesn't become overwhelmed. Ideally, in less than a 1,000-year event. Here you can see in this photograph, here's the alluvial fan, and it's supposed to be a braided system, and it's working really well. I really like this picture. I kind of geek out on it because it shows a single thread channel there. And that's what really transports a lot of sediment and things like that. So that's right next to our alluvial fan. This is in the Brandis watershed. On the Peaceful Way watershed, there's somewhat of an alluvial fan right here, right above the residential area. It really couldn't be a natural feature in a worse place, because this alluvial fan is spreading water out kind of haphazardly in an uncontrolled manner, right at the Forest Service boundary. And so it splits around the houses that are there. Sometimes it goes this way, sometimes it goes that way. And remember, this is in an unmitigated watershed. Then it comes across the Forest Service boundary. So there's Glen Drive right here, Highway 89 is right over here, Copeland Basin's right there, and Kevin's Way is right over here. So from the air, from a helicopter, this picture was taken and there's a gullying, so it got into a channel and eroded, so it started sourcing more sediment, and then it spread out into that El Dorado neighborhood. And so that we pick up kind of this picture down here, and there's the Copeland Basin again, Highway 89 and Kevin's Way, and the water spreading in here. Water in this event hit Kevin's Way and flowed down Kevin's Way into the Highway 89 channel. Ideally, more of the water would have crossed into the Copeland Basin. The county doesn't own this land on the north side of Kevin's Way. It's all private property. Even Kevin's Way is a private road. The county doesn't maintain, it's not in the county's inventory. So over the years with the maintenance that's been done on Kevin's Way, a berm was pushed up and blocked flow from getting from the Kevin's Way from this area into,
That's not what happened. That's not what happened.
Absolutely not.
Thank you very much for just reiterating what we said yesterday.
Okay, so can we agree that there's a berm there?
Yes, there is, but there was no
Okay.
water.
And we asked for the berm to be removed when Ronco was building them, and they said, the county said no.
Okay, well,
That's
so
100%.
So where we're at now is I went and spoke to the residents that are there, and they said that initially they had refused in the past. And they've signed.
Wait, these are the residents.
Hey, let me have a chance. Let me have a chance.
Can we hear him out first, please? And then you're welcome to comment. Thank you.
So I went and talked to the owner of this parcel right here. And he's signed a construction easement so that we can go in there and take care of that area so that we can get the water that runs down Kevin's Way off of a significant amount of it. There's still the potential, because we don't have drainage infrastructure through the area, that, like I talked about with the alluvial fan, it's not a consistent flow path. And so as sediment gets deposited, things are going to happen different ways. And so we're going to remove, we have permission, and we're going to do the work to remove that sediment and get flow into in the Copeland Basin. On the forest then, there was quite a bit of debris that was mobilized. And there's been a lot of concern about where that came from, and was it normal, was it exasperated by our flood mitigation measures. You can see in this picture, after the flood, it was high intensity, or excuse me, after the fire, it was a high intensity fire. And it's not real typical of a forest fire, but because of the high intensity fire, it burned everything. It was kind of a scorched earth type situation. And in the last 7 or 8 years, those trees have died and they've fallen over, and they kind of charged this channel and the other areas with debris, with dead trees rotting and things like that. And so a huge amount of those were mobilized in this rainfall event and brought down into the residential area. And so some of the areas look like this, where the trees were just mobilized and plugged up, and some of them plugged up temporarily, things built up, and then it released somewhat catastrophically. The flood mitigation measures in Brandis, that's what it looked like in 2013. This is what it looked like in 2018, just last week. So these are sacrificial basins. They're meant to fill up with sediment for the most part, and then we walk away from them. Once the forest heals and we have more vegetation on the slopes, then we are going to have less sediment coming down, and so we need these sacrificial basins less. We still want the alluvial fans, and they'll still continue to play a role in trapping sediment in the forest. This is a terminal trench right above Brandis Way, and it was hit pretty hard. And the logs are cabled together, and there's dead man anchors. Some of the logs did break, but it's largely there. And the flow comes from this fan. It's collected in this trench, and then it flows out over this rock weir in a single thread channel. And so we're working with the Forest Service. They've given us a leeway to do the maintenance that we need to do. It's pretty non-typical for a county or any other local government to be doing work on national forest land. We knew back in 2010 when we realized what had happened, that it wasn't just going to be in the residential area on county lands where the solutions were going to have to come from. And so it was pretty hard fought to get permission from our federal government for the county to do flood mitigation work. So people really pushed hard in order for this to happen. This is really unprecedented. So the measures that are up there are pretty unique, but they experienced 6 inches of rain in 2 hours, and so they far exceeded the design capacity of the structures. So I'm curious, when we go next door, I'd like to hear about what we saw and how things came to be, so that we can fix things and we can make sure they don't happen again. So please come talk to me. I'm going to turn it over to Mike Lopker, our Deputy Director of Public Works, and then we'll get together next door. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Mike Lopker. I've got a sand on this X. My name is Mike Lopker, and I'm a Deputy Public Works Director for Coconino County. And I'm here tonight to tell you a little bit about what we do during a storm, because we fully expect there to be more storms this summer. I'm going to tell you how we monitor and what you can do. I'm also going to tell you about some of the services that we're going to provide to help with this current storm. So, Mark, can we have the next slide? There's a Public Works flood team that's on duty all summer long, and it's a group of individuals that we get text alerts whenever those rain gauges go off, and we're on duty whether it's a weekend or whether it's night or whether it's a holiday. So all summer, all season long, we're monitoring, so we know when we need to respond. First, we monitor the National Service weather. We also watch the radar because we've gotten decent at interpreting that and knowing when things may turn a problem. We also monitor the rain gauges. And then, like I said, we get text alerts when the rain gauges hit a certain threshold. On the July 14th incident, we were getting 26 text alerts. It was hard to do other work that day because it was so intense and that they kept coming in so quickly. When there's a certain threshold, we mobilize and we send people up there. Because even though we're watching the weather and the rain gauges, we can't always tell what's happening and if water's really coming out of the forest and how intense it is. So we'll send people to check, and then they will call and mobilize whatever forces we need. On July the 18th, we had a motor grader on Brandis taking the rocks and the timbers off of it almost during that storm. The intensity had lessened, but the water was still coming out of the channel and down Brandis Way, and we were trying to get the big debris off. Our prime concern is life safety. We want to make sure that the roads are open and passable, and if emergency vehicles need to get through, that's our goal. Make sure that there's a clear passage both for you and for emergency services. Our team was on site on Saturday, July the 14th, on Monday, July the 16th, and July the 18th. We mobilized people up there to see what was happening. Interesting, on July the 14th and on July the 16th, they went up and said everything's contained within the drainages fundamentally. July the 18th was a much different story. Next slide, please. After the event on July the 18th, the Sheriff's Department, CCSO, Coconino County Sheriff's Office, mobilized immediately. And again, our primary concern is life safety, knocking on doors, making sure no one had been hurt or something worse. Public Works and other agencies, the United Way, joined together, and on the 19th we had teams knocking on doors, 7 teams of 2 people asking what kind of assistance do people need. And so we wanted to make sure that we were there as quickly as possible and providing assistance. Again, checking for life safety issues first, then property damage, then then home damage, then property damage, and then what kind of assistance people might need that we could help with. Next slide. This map is the map that we gave each of the teams, and they marked an X on it at the time, and we've colored it in now. And that map represents to us the requests that we got on the 19th, on Friday the 19th. Now, I know this isn't everything that everybody needs. All I'm saying is our initial assessment drew these conclusions. We got some more information from folks last night, and I know you'll give us some information tonight about what we can do to help you. But we found 3 homes with flood damage inside. We learned there were structures and outbuildings with flood damage. 9 primary structures requested jersey barriers, and those were placed by Saturday in case there was another event, because I forget the percentage, but the Weather Service predicted there was 20 or 30% chance of another event on the following Saturday and Sunday. 2 properties requested debris removal at that time, and there were 160 properties where people said we're just thankful that it wasn't worse and we don't need any assistance right now. 5 properties requested sandbags. So out there the following day, doing our best to serve. Next slide. In addition, we had road maintenance. I already mentioned that we were up there during the storm, but they have been clearing the roads in that area since, and trying to improve those roads. It's going to take about 2 more weeks before we're through with that work. No more storms in the meantime. We've also hired a private contractor to clear the channel. I know you've probably seen the heavy equipment there. We have engineering firms on site, and they're assessing the channel, trying to determine what happened, how do we repair it, and how do we make sure that it's clear for the next event. And fundamentally, we're working to ensure that we're ready for the floods or for any rains or storms for the rest of the season. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we would like to help with is debris removal. And so we're asking that the debris that got onto your property, please move that to the edge of your property, somewhere where we can come by with a truck and either heavy equipment or crew and pick that up and take it to the landfill. The other thing is we were asking that you separate that material into a couple of piles. One of the things, you saw the pictures, one of the sources of material that came was lumber, trees, that sort of thing out of the forest. Put that in one pile. We're able to take that to the landfill, and then they chip that up and they use it as long as it's clean. And a lot of it got washed, so from our observations, a lot of that's clean. If you can put that in a separate pile, we'll pick that up and it'll be put to another use. The other thing that came out of the forest is dirt and rocks. And if you can put that in a different pile, we'll do our best to pick that up, and we're actually reusing some of that material as well. If you have difficulty identifying in your property, not every property is the same. Some people have fences or pillars or things that might obstruct our ability to access the debris. You call us and call this phone number, 679-8393. We'll come and spot a location for you, either on your property or nearby where we think we can come and pick up that material. We're not putting dumpsters in the neighborhood because our experience in 2013 was that some people have tractors and they got loaded so heavy, we had to unload them onto the street before the truck could actually pick them up and take them off. And so that didn't work very well for us with the rocks and the dirt that got put in them. We're also giving people who live in this area, authority to take flood-related forest debris to the city of Flagstaff landfill until August the 10th. So if you don't want to wait for us, you want material to get out of here, please take the forest debris, the lumber, those trees, to the landfill, and they will accept it. You will be authorized if you can show a driver's license, a water bill, APS bill, gas bill that says that you live at that location, and the landfill will let you in until August the 10th under those conditions. We move back to moving the debris to the edge of your property. Tonight, if you would like debris removal, would you please sign up? And one of the purposes of signing up is we'll try and schedule a route through the neighborhood so that we're not jumping back and forth from property to property. And we'll remove that material as efficiently and as quickly as we can, also at the lowest cost. So sign up and we'll try and schedule a route to come and collect it. Next slide, please. Sandbags are available at the Tumbleweed store just north of here. And jersey barriers, again, if you'll tell us tonight if you think you need jersey barriers, we will come out and help to spot those and guide you on where they need to go and make sure we miss obstacles, wells, septic, any other obstacles that might be on your property. Next slide. Okay, I think that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Allie. I also work with the Public Works Department at the county, and I want to share with you some communication resources and reinforce kind of the best way to keep in touch as we move forward. First off, did everybody get a packet when they walked in today? And if you did not, please stop by the front table and get one. Let me just show you what's in the packet very quickly here. The first page is simply the agenda for today. The second page is a summary of the resources available through the county, including sandbags and jersey barriers, as well as a description of the debris haul-off services and information about dropping off at the landfill. Finally, at the bottom, a lot of volunteers want to formally volunteer to help neighbors, and this is a really kind of wonderful aspect of of your community. We've witnessed this time and time again, this notion of neighbors helping neighbors. So if you know folks who are interested in volunteering to help other folks who may not have the ability to do the property clearing, please contact the United Way. Maybe Carol can raise her hand, and Steve back there. They're taking names of folks who might be interested in volunteering, or if you know, anybody who might be interested, let them know. And then the back side of that sheet actually is a checklist for you. If you opt in to the debris haul-off services, these are all of the things you need to do in order for us to be able to take your debris. So please make sure that you call us to let us know that you want us to take your debris and that you sort it into the appropriate piles and whatnot. So there are some notes there. And then we have, and just as a small unflashy description of how to build a sandbag wall if you need those resources. There's also a video on our website. Finally, the flood advisory that we mail out every June, we just have a copy of that here for your reference. And the final page is a brochure from FEMA about flood insurance, just to help direct you if you're interested in more information. And then I want to reiterate, the call center phone number that we use during emergency operations will be repurposed if there's another emergent situation. So if you need to reach us regarding this recovery process, give us a call here at our emergency management number, 679-8393. It's on the bottom of the front page. It's pretty much on every single piece of paper that we print. The Schultz Flood Recovery email address, schultzfloodrecovery@coconino.az.gov, comes to my inbox and Mark's inbox and Sean's inbox. He's hiding. So there's a couple of us that will field your emails and get them in the right hands if you have a specific inquiry for an engineer or a referral question. Please feel free to use that if phone calls are not easy for you or inconvenient for whatever reason. And then we are posting stuff to the coconino.az.gov Schultz Flood Information webpage as we have it. So for example, these videos of today's meeting and last night's meeting will be up there as soon as we're ready to do that, the PowerPoint presentations, other kind of resource handouts, things like that. So please use the website resources as they're available. We encourage everyone to sign up for emergency notifications at coconino.az.gov/ready. You can also do that here. Blake is waving his hands. He has 2 computers back there, and Blake and Sam will help you sign up if you're not already signed up. There's a lot of opportunity. Let's see, the National Flood Insurance Program website is also up here. And then if you're interested in weather alerts, and paying attention to those rain gauges that we talked about, you have real-time access to the data that we have real-time access to as well. It's a really interesting opportunity. So we encourage you to sign up for the weather service alerts and also just know the resources that we have available to you. Finally, Supervisor Archuleta will be sending out a mailing by the end of the week that will, for the most part, summarize the presentations today and share resources, and we'll be sending it to all of the residences for whom we have addresses. So it's very important that we get your address and your phone number, and we know that you're here. And I know some folks are tenants and not the property owners, so if that's the case, make sure that we have your address too, and we'll send them to both, because the baseline data we use is from the assessor's office, and that's the property owners, right? So, and I just encourage you to call that 679-8393 with any questions or any concerns that may come up over the next few weeks. We're here and available and eager to help kind of get you connected with whatever you need to get moving forward. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Supervisor Archuleta, and thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you. Thanks, Ellie. I wanted to give an opportunity to United Way. Let me go ahead and get the lights. Oh, sorry. Beg your pardon. I wanted to give the opportunity to United Way to speak to maybe some of the resources and volunteers that might be available to help. We are partnering with our nonprofit partners to try to see if we can get resources available for people, especially people who cannot physically do the work themselves. Okay, so Steve?
Thank you, Liz. My name is Steve Prue. I'm with United Way of Northern Arizona. And in 2010, I was on the county staff at that time. So myself and many others in the room witnessed what was going on, but you lived it, and you're living it. And that's a big distinction. You know, you live it every day. And so to the extent that we can support what's going on in the neighborhood is what we want to do. We're a member of an organization, VOAD, Volunteer Organizations Active in Disaster. It's United Way, Red Cross, Salvation Army, and others, including emergency management in the state. And so what we want to do is really provide the opportunity to support those who really need the assistance, that for whatever reason, physical ailments, whatnot, are not able to do that. And that's where we come in. Back in 2010, this neighborhood saw hundreds of volunteers coming through. And we're, in some ways, we want to make sure that we can manage that kind of resource, because volunteers come in, they come with a big heart. They come and ask, what can they do to help you out? And that's what we certainly want to do again as we go forward. But we want to make sure that we organize that in such a way that we first, number one, understand what your needs are, and that's the purpose of the call center process. It provides the opportunity for you to call in, check in with the county, provide information on your need, and then the county tracks that. It's not, you know, it certainly is not the dark hole that you make a call and nothing happens. And the county's very vigilant about making sure we close the loop on those calls that come in. So back to what Supervisor Archuleta said, our priority is going to be to mobilize volunteers to help those individuals in the community that do not have the physical ability to do the work that needs to be done. And so the call center has already received a number of requests for assistance. We're looking at that. We're going to meet this week to identify how do we prioritize that, and then how do we get the word out to the bigger community about what the needs are locally. And back in, I guess, in 2010, we had a lot of employee groups from employers, of course, that wanted to volunteer. We're going to be doing the same kind of reach out. We're also looking to the volunteers that volunteered back in 2010 to see if, hey, would you want to do it again? And so we're looking at other ways to do that. We're also possibly looking at identifying a single day within the next couple of weeks where we make all this happen. You know, kind of a day of caring, a day of action where we mobilize the volunteers and of course, matching that up with the needs of the community. We hope to make a positive impact to assist you during these stressful times. So that's what volunteer is all about, and that's what our role is, to support you all, the community, and support the county's efforts as well. Thank you.
So now's probably a good time for the subject matter experts to head to the tables and get ready for questions.
I have a question first.
Sure.
Could we, I think a lot of people have questions. And instead of separating us, I think we would like to have, ask questions. And then
Sure. Well, why don't we have about 15 15 minutes of questions, and then if you have individual specific questions about your homes, and then we want to make sure and be recording all the damage. So if you haven't called in, we want to make sure and get all the damage recorded. So go ahead. I think you had your hand up.
One question. Well, not a question, but our flood in our area, 650 Avenue, came from Banks Way. Right at that corner by Fiesta, turn on the bridge. The bridge flushed up and shot water past that lane and onto our property. So there's big flaws in the design of it. It's too small, and you can see the leak coming down the wash. And if you live anywhere out in the country, you know when it rains, something comes together. And if you go up that, if you route that wash, there's nothing up there. It's been like that before. I lived up that wash, and I don't see no levees or nothing to slow down the water.
Did you get any flows on the 2 rain events before that?
I was working in Las Vegas, so but when I went back up there Saturday, went right up there and I saw it all the debris. And there's a dike right around the Lynn Road. And this is where the water accumulates, and that's when it goes to her place and then my place, and everybody else.
Yeah. So to our knowledge, and again, we've had people on the property, but you will know better. Did anybody receive any flows from the 2 events prior? Okay, so I would like you to show us that path that you said the water came through. No, I know that, but I want you to show us on a map. Okay? But I understand that, and I think what I'd like to convey to you is that what we heard about the amount of water that came down, I don't think we're not going to be able to put an infrastructure to prevent that with that amount of water. We're not going to be able to build or to improve or to renovate a canal that's going to handle a 1,000-year event. Okay, well, you can certainly discuss that with our engineers, because if you have some ideas, we'd be happy to look at them. Yeah. Others? Yes.
I actually have 3 questions.
Sure.
So with the $10.1 million flood mitigation project and the emergency funds that were received, why were no funds applied to the Peaceful Way drainage and Kevin's Way neighborhood? You're talking about these sacrificial basins. Why wasn't one created for us up in the forest? I understand what you were saying yesterday about people not granting easements, but again, we were not told about any pursuing of easements. But where is our basin and our work up in the forest?
Sure. So in order for the county to get a special use permit from the Forest Service, the county had to agree that there would be a single thread channel that would go all the way from the forest property all the way through the residential neighborhoods to Highway 89. And we could not get full agreement from neighbors to give the easements that were required. And on top of that, we had already had easements from Brandis and from Copeland folks. And so we constructed those, and that's where the money went. And so we couldn't get agreement, and so we were not able to construct any fans.
Right, but for a retention basin, you don't need an agreement for that up in the forest.
Yes, we do. Any work that a county does in the forest has to have a special use permit.
And then I don't understand though why that's not applied.
Who
wasn't, that has nothing to do with our properties.
Yeah, because the Forest Service would not agree for the county to do any work on Forest Service property unless we could carry water from the forest through the neighborhood to Highway 89.
Okay. And then as homes started requesting removal of the barriers in our neighborhood, why did the county not inform us at all that no mitigation work had been done in our area?
Well, I believe you might have known that no flood mitigation was done. If you didn't know,
No.
I apologize, but
No.
it should. I mean, if the county wanted, so first of all, you didn't. If you signed up for Jersey barriers, you didn't have to turn those in. Those were yours.
Yes, you did.
No. Well, I'm sorry, but it was in the paperwork. It's an option.
That was a recommendation that the construction company was going to be out here now if you want them removed. Why would
Right.
you even suggest that if no mitigation has been done in our area at all?
Well, I'll go back to the email or to the letter. What it should have said is if you want to have your Jersey barriers removed, you can. There will be one opportunity or maybe two. I think we had two opportunities for people to sign up to get them removed. But actually, they belong to you, and it was your option to do that.
And then lastly, I spoke with Ally on Friday, and she said that soil tests had been done for E. coli from septic runoff. Where do we find those results?
I don't know that E. coli tests have been done. We'll ask Ally right now. We have no reports of any septic tanks being compromised in our assessment of the area. But Ally, do you want to respond to
So
that?
I said that the public health teams were out assessing the kind of the status of the septic tanks, and there was no evidence of any of them being compromised. And so what I relate to is that I would feel pretty confident taking my dog spray. I think that's what we specifically had talked about. And since then we have no reports of any concern that would require any further testing or attention to that. I think as we move through monsoon season, the health district and our community development department are going to keep watch of that. There were a few septics that were emptied right before the storm. They were worried about those, but they're in good shape. So,
Yes.
Not to be facetious, but what's the chances of us getting another 1,000-year flood?
I don't know. Let's ask the meteorologist, the scientist, who can answer that. Go ahead, Brian. What's the chances of another 1,000-year flood?
Yeah, it's a highly unusual and extreme event, like I said. The terms and the calculations of
Oh, can you
that-
come over here? I'm sorry, Brian. Just because I want people who are not here to be able to hear this.
No, that's a great question because it brings to bear just how those calculations are made. You know, why is it called a 1,000-year event? And why, according to those calculations, is there a 0.1% chance that it will happen in any given year? So with the current knowledge, or I should say with the knowledge that was known when that atlas was created, it's something all of you can look at. It's called NOAA Atlas 14. It's online, and it gives the return interval frequencies of various rainfall intensities per 15 minutes, half hour, 1 hour, and so on. That wasn't developed with the gauges that are currently on the peaks. So perhaps a new analysis would show a different frequency interval. But given the information we have, the estimate would be a 0.1% chance any year. So very small.
It seems like we get 100-year flood every other day, at times. I just wondered, with the mountain burn, I think all that changes.
Again, we're talking, let's be clear that I'm talking about rainfall. A flood event is different. So to talk about a 1,000-year flood event is different from a 1,000-year precipitation event. You're absolutely right. Having the mountain in the condition it's in now will change the equation for the frequency of damaging floods. So, yeah, that's a good point.
Chris Duza, do you want to comment on that as well? Why don't you come over here, please? Thanks.
My name is Chris Hughes. I'm with Civil Tech Engineering. Just one thing to remember when you talk about recurrence intervals for storms. When you talk about a 100-year event, the misconception is that happens once every 100 years. That's not the case. Or a 1,000-year event happens once every 1,000 years. A 100-year event has the probability, a 1% probability of happening in any given year. You can have that this year, you can have it next year, you can have multiple 100-year events in the same year. So that's the misconception. Well, we've had a 100-year event, we're not due for another 100 years, or we're not due for another 1,000 years, but you still have the same probability now that you did 2 weeks ago before this event happened.
Yes?
I
forget the gentleman's name, the engineer, he was saying that at the corner of Three Man Trail and Kevin's Way, the owner signed a deeded easement. Now, my question is that gonna be recorded easement, therefore county's taking that as total control? Or is this a one-time easement to give you a little bit of latitude to try and do something? With that being said, what is your plan?
Well, I can show you next door what the plan is. And it's a temporary construction easement,
Okay?
but it was really amenable to partnering with the county and with the neighborhood and figuring out a solution. And if it was something that he could do on his property to help the situation, then he wanted to talk about it.
So then in the future, going further, it would still be then left to us to maintain whatever you're gonna do, is that correct?
Well, hopefully what we do, there's no maintenance, or the maintenance is very small. But you're right, the Kevin's Way and the drainage infrastructure that's there is, the county doesn't have an agreement with the residents to do the maintenance. So it's,
So as far as doing the mitigation and stopping anything flow or everything else like that, I've also been told that if a homeowner, quote unquote, changes the flow of the water, then that is actually, and it causes a situation to another property, then it goes back to then the homeowner that made the change. And so my question goes back to, say the lady on the opposite side says, you know what, I'm tired of all this flooding to my property, I'm gonna put up barriers. Then that hits the next guy. So my question is, can you give me some direction, because there again, if you're maintaining this, it's gonna be long-term by us. Any help, any direction, and actually what you're gonna do, I sure would like to be part of it.
sure, it's a dynamic situation out there.
Sure.
And whether people are changing things on their property on purpose or not,
Sure,
just given the sediment and the debris that comes off, changes things as well.
absolutely.
And so, but you're right, one neighbor shouldn't produce something that has an adverse impact to another neighbor. And I haven't seen too much of that,
Oh, no.
but we could definitely help people identify plans. And there was, the group that was here yesterday, they got a lot of energy and they want to talk to their neighbors and they want to try to come up with a solution together. And so I'm sure there's a way the county can help facilitate that if people wanted to. And there's different avenues and potentially sources of funding to assist in that. Because this area has received a disaster, it's not FEMA at the federal level, but it's at the state level. You can apply for a grant and potentially get some funding to help in that area. And we could help you look at that and get the right people in the room from the state to make that happen.
So this easement, and I'm just clarifying for myself, is not a deeded easement. So if he sells and the next owner decides, I don't like it, he can fill it in. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's worst case scenario, right?
Understand, no, understand.
But
we have a worst case scenario on rain. So I asked the question with the logic system behind it. So,
Have
Other
the
questions?
ditches or whatever was blocked, been cleared out? I don't know if anyone knows that yet.
so so the county, in an emergency situation, if residents desire, the county will go onto private or public access roads that we don't normally maintain, and we will blade them off. And so we've done that in a lot of places. We've removed the debris.
No, I think he's
from the
talking
roads.
about like
Brandis.
those ones.
Where the water came from originally, well.
Okay,
this
yeah.
flood, all those areas have been cleared and
Yeah, they're either cleared or they're being cleared. You've probably seen those two big vac trucks there at the entrance of Kevin's Way, and we're cleaning out the debris that's jammed in there. And there's other places crews are doing work. Here.
I live on Kevin's Way,
Okay.
so that's not a problem. But I was thinking Burris.
Or Brandis or
Brandis,
Burris? Yeah,
I'm
Brandis.
sorry, Brandis.
Yeah,
Now,
I do the
that's
same
where-
thing.
That's where the water came from, wasn't it? That came down into Kevin's?
Well, there's a watershed. There's potentially some water did come from Brandis. And then there's the.
Hang on, let's get Chris on this too. 'Cause
But
he's
there's
the
a
one that-
peaceful way watershed too, right?
That water came from
That's-
Band's.
No,
Okay, right.
there were 3 locations along Brandis where debris piled up along the bridges And when it piled up on the bridges, you're right, it jumped over the road and it headed down towards Kevin Ways in 3 spots. You're right, I saw it. I went out and looked at it.
I was right up there looking at it.
Right. Now that being said, there was more water that came from the peaceful watershed from the forest. It was a combination of two, but I think the majority of the water didn't come from Brandis. Some of it did, but the majority of it came from the peaceful watershed. Now with that being said, before those improvements were done on Brandis, there was no drainage infrastructure along Brandis before these mitigation measures were built. So if that event would have happened before any of the mitigation measures of the channel was there, the vast majority of that water would have went down towards Kevin's Way. So you're right, some of the water did there, but it would have been a heck of a lot worse if that channel wasn't in place. But you are correct.
If you overflow the first bridge, this where the whole flood was, this where the corner is of Yesterday, this where the water shot straight towards.
But the mitigation measures that were designed were not designed for the mobilization of debris off the forest for a 1,000-year rainfall event.
So I guess the question would be, since 2010 to now, in the past 5 years, from 2013 to 2018, have you received flooding? No. So that means the flood mitigation measures worked for the rain events that we've had up until now. It's a 1,000-year rain event. Those mitigation structures will not work in a 1,000-year rain event. So I understand. I mean, it's a big shock for everybody because for 5 years we've had no flooding, which means it's worked. And there's just no way we can build something or will build something to handle a 1,000-year event. We can't do that. We won't.
But in those 5 years, we didn't have downpour like we can have it now.
I know.
So how do we know if it actually works within that?
Because on July, what Brian had said is the 2 rain events prior to the one that we had on the 18th were equivalent to the big one we had in 2010. So it worked then.
So we didn't have the mitigation anyway, so it didn't matter.
No, I know, but I just want to correct information. I just want to be factual. You didn't get flows on those 2 events. Let's just be factual. And so, last night people said, well, some people said on Brandis, we received the same amount of water that we received in 2010. And I said, okay, the same amount of water. So then this rain on July 18th of this year dropped 3 times more water than was in 2010. And you received the same amount of water. So then you have to ask yourself, where did the other 2/3 of the water go? If it was 3 times as much water, where did the other 2/3 go? It went into the flood mitigation systems. So another way of looking at it is, if it hadn't gone into the flood mitigation system, the flooding would have been 3 times as worse. Okay, yes, Chris?
Just for some additional context, at the time that the mitigation measures were designed, they were designed for a 5-year rainfall event. Right after the fire, when the fire occurs, the whole hydrology and the whole runoff from the mountain changed, where it was producing a lot more runoff than it ever did historically. But through time, the watershed begins to recover and you see less and less runoff. So immediately after the fire, you're going to see the most amount of runoff. And then there's a short-term recovery period and a long-term recovery period. So we're somewhere between a short-term and a long-term recovery period. So keep in mind that that infrastructure was designed for a 5-year event shortly after the fire, and we received a 1,000-year rainfall event. So obviously, chances are it's not going to handle it. But what we thought, and keep in mind with what was done out in the forest, this is the only place in the country that this has ever been done. This is the first time it's been done. To be honest with you, we were never really sure. We knew it was going to recover and we knew it was going to heal. And if we could design for a 5-year event right now, maybe in the future, like Christopher said, that becomes a 25-year event in the future. And we thought, probably in the future, it'll handle between a 25 and a 50-year event, but definitely not a 1,000-year event. So,
Yes?
And what's your guys' plans for all the debris that's in that bottom basement? You like it?
It's available. So part of the, are we talking about the Copeland channel, or the Copeland basin? So part of those basins, there's actually 4 in there. There's 2 up in the corners. Those are meant to be sacrificial as well. As the forest heals, we'll see less and less sediment, and those will fill up. The system will still function once those are filled up, and it'll go into the larger basin. Once the basin is dried out, we're going to go in there and get the woody debris out of there so it doesn't plug the trash racks and the downstream infrastructure. So we'll get in there eventually. It just looks like a pretty bad situation with all the mud right now.
Okay, yes, and then we're gonna move into.
Yeah, last but not least.
Sure, no, it's okay.
I'm not in that neighborhood down south of Kevin's Way. I'm in the neighborhood where nobody gave up the property for any mitigation. Those people have since left. Out of the 13 people that live there, there's 3 that are still there. So it's obvious that those people that didn't wanna do it are gone. That's why they didn't wanna do it. How do you get that going again? Because we had a major flow that wiped out our road, and it filled the basin right there at the corner, you know, behind the house on the corner of Daniel Way and Copeland. It filled it.
That's my house, by the way. That's a lot of water in there. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
So.
that came through that
Sure.
neighborhood and wiped the road out.
So what we'll be able to do will depend on a number of things. Primarily, the residents' willingness to get together and to see if there's a solution. That would mean needing to give up easements or whatever is needed. Secondly, it would depend on the Forest Service if we were to consider doing something up on the forest. Thirdly, it would be contingent upon funding that we would get. And Chris mentioned that we did declare a state of emergency. We are looking to the state for some funding, looking to the federal government through the Natural Resource Conservation Service. But we don't have any, we don't have a check that's been written, right? So right now we don't have that. And so those would be the factors, and then the county, just the staff, the time that it would take to put something like that together.
Well, most of that flooding that came across the road there came across property that is basically vacant. I mean, it's owned, but nobody's living on it. And then some of it may have been diverted by new houses that went in after 2010. And it was my understanding that those new houses were supposed to do something about mitigating water across their property, not just shoving it off. So, I mean, like tonight we're talking about Kevin's Way and we're talking about Brandon's Way, but nobody mentioned any looking over here in our area. And I think it needs to be. There's something wrong there. We got a hell of a lot of water through it. It filled that one basin.
Well, definitely, I would like for you to, speak to any of the engineers, show us on the map where the water crossed your property that you're talking about, and we definitely want to get together with this gentleman here where he said all the water and debris went on your property.
It comes down Atkinson from Chris's house and comes right through my front yard and fills up my backyard, which borders your retention basin back there. Now, there's some natural elevation changes there that have been done years and years and years ago. Not by me, not by any of my
No, probably when
neighbors.
it was being filled, when it was
So.
terraced and.
Probably so.
Yeah.
But I'd like to piggyback on her comment. I was here for the first event, and I asked what the plans were for our neighborhoods. I saw neighborhoods that were cherry-picked. I saw people that were getting things done in this neighborhood and that neighborhood. And just like Chris said, our neighborhood was just kind of left out there to dry, just to hang in the breeze. Now I've seen, after that event, numerous 10-wheel dump trucks coming down my road, which is privately owned, by the way.
Right.
By the county. The county was driving those dump trucks down my road, tearing my road up to fix gunmen, but never came over to my property or to my road to fill in the first 600 feet of Daniel Way. How does that get cherry picked to fix Gunman but not fix my road?
It doesn't get cherry picked. Actually, hang on,
We're
hold
gonna
on,
be out there for
hold
2
on.
more weeks.
We're not done, guys. We only have so many resources. We are not done. And we have to take actually we had to take all the debris off of Brandis first because there's 2-foot boulders, there's trees. We had to take all of that first to do that. We're not done. And on top of that, the county can only go on private roads and private roads during an emergency. And we can't fully restore a road, we can't rebuild a road. We are only allowed to make it open and passable so that emergency vehicles can get in and that you can get out.
Gunman was in less state of disrepair than my road was.
Okay, well we
So
will.
when you tell me, you give me a lot of excuses, you give all.
Oh, I'm
these
not
a
giving
lot of
any excuses right now, sir.
Yes,
No,
you are.
I'm saying, hold on. Hey, guys, other counties don't do anything in terms of flood mitigation. And I would just like to have a little bit of appreciation for the work that's been done by the county crews, many of who are here. I would like to have just a little bit of appreciation.
There's no doubt
We
that
will
the
go,
people on the ground.
excuse me, we will go to your road and we will get to it. We are not done. We cannot clean up massive amounts of damage in less than a week. We need to have more time. We will get to it. If you find that we don't get to it, then you be the first one to call me up and say we didn't. But we will get to it.
Not a problem.
Okay, thank you. We are going to adjourn to this bay. Thank you all for coming tonight. We appreciate it.